Greetings, Rabbi Gruscott here with your virtual sermon for this coming Shabbos. Well, I've been receiving all sorts of jokes and memes, and my Facebook and WhatsApp has been inundated with people sending all sorts of jokes and memes in this coronavirus crisis. And one that gave me a good chuckle was last week. There's a British comedian, religious Jew named Ashley Blaker, who posted, "I really enjoyed davening at home last Shabbos, but I said something in my sermon that I didn't agree with, and then I promised never to step foot into my own home again." So kind of one of the very cute statuses that's out there. Other people are joking that now that everyone's davening at home, if your family is big enough, there will inevitably be breakaway minions, right? So the kitchen is the minion that I daven in, but in the living room, the people who are over there, that's the shul that I would never step foot into, right? Jews will inevitably settle into those sort of patterns that we have. So if we were in shul tomorrow, we would be reading from two Torahs. And there are others who are joking that we sort of dodged a bullet because this is the longest possible Torah reading of the year that we sort of get out of reading. But the first Torah is Vayachal Pekudei, a very long double parsha, all about the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, in the desert, with exhaustive detail of the architectural plans for every single vessel and item in the tabernacle. So people who are either artists or architects are very interested in the parsha tomorrow. And then we'd take out a second Torah, from which we would read HaChodesh, because we bless the new month of Nisan, the month of Pesach. We would bless the new month of Nisan tomorrow. We can all do so from our homes. And we read from the book of Exodus, where it says, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, Rosh Chodeshim, this month is the first of months for you. That was the very first mitzvah, the very first commandment the Jewish people were given collectively. 2 weeks even before the Exodus from Egypt, they were told, sanctify time, Rosh Chodesh, the new moon. Every new moon is a special occasion, and every month will have its own special days and holidays within it. So it occurred to me that these two Torahs that we would be reading from speak to two different levels of sanctity with which people interact. So the first Torah, which is about the tabernacle, is all about Kedushat Makom, the sanctity of space. And that's really what we've lost during that time. We've lost our Kedushat Makom, our access to the synagogue building. But the second Torah, Parshat HaChodesh, about Rosh Chodesh, is really about Kedushat Zman, the sanctity of time. Right? As human beings, we exist within space-time, the space-time continuum. It's not surprising that Judaism has these two special sanctities. We're required to sanctify space, and we're required to sanctify time. The intensity of that sanctity of space is really spoken to toward the end of the second Parsha. The cloud covered the tent of meeting when it had been completed, and the glory of Hashem filled the tabernacle. And Moses could not enter the tent of meeting, for the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of Hashem filled the tabernacle. So this intensely sacred space that they had just created was so holy that even the great Moses could not, he trembled to enter into it because the presence of God descended upon it in the cloud. And it's not until the beginning of next week's Parsha that God lovingly invites Moses, no, come in, I want to commune with you. But even in that sacred space, there's clearly different spaces that are more sacred than others. There's the Kodesh, the holy area where the menorah is, and there's the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was, where only the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, could enter on Yom Kippur for his Day of Atonement service. In the world today, without a temple, we still have Kedushat Makom. We have sanctity of space. Every synagogue is a Mikdash Ma'at. Every synagogue is a sacred space. Also, the land of Israel is holier than other places. And within Israel, there's delineations of sacred areas. So Jerusalem is holier than the rest of Israel. And the Temple Mount is holier than the rest of Jerusalem. And even on the Temple Mount, even without a temple, there are delineations of spaces that are more sacred than others. So that's Kedushat Makom. The second reading, Kedushat Zman, the sanctity of time. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe v'el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana. Hashem said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be for you the first of the months of the year. The rabbis make a big deal out of one word, hachodesh hazeh lachem. This month is for you. It is up to you, human beings, to sanctify time. That will not happen on its own. It is a very human trait and indeed a very Jewish trait. And it was incredibly important for them as freed slaves. A slave, Rabbi Soloveitchik points out, a slave does not have his own time. He works whenever the master says he works, and he's not able to sanctify time. He doesn't have a day off. And that's why the very first commandment was every month you have to sanctify and be conscious of where you are in time. So it occurred to me that while we've lost our sense of Kedushat Makom, we've lost our access to the sanctity of space, we have to sort of retreat and fall back into Kedushat Zman, the sanctity of time, which is this very Jewish idea. I myself find myself being more in touch with sort of the rhythms of sunrise and sunset as I stay at home. I'm kind of like Crocodile Dundee. I look to the sky. What time of day is it? You sort of revert to that natural instinct when your routine is shaken up in the way that all of our routines currently are. But I realized that, like so many dichotomies that rabbis like to make, perhaps it's a false dichotomy that I've been developing. Kedushat Makom, Kedushat Zman, because the truth is that the second Torah reading about Rosh Chodesh also contains a subtle hint of Kedushat Makom, of sanctity of space as well. It's just a little bit more subtle. And so the third verse, Dabru al kol adat Yisrael lemor be'asor lachodesh hazeh v'yikhu lahem ish sel veit avot sel habayit, speaks to the entire assembly of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month they shall take for themselves, each person, a lamb or kid for each father's house, a lamb or kid for the household. This was a unique korban, a unique sacrifice in all of history. They were commanded to take the very first Pesach offering, and there's no central place of worship. There's no temple, there is no altar. Everyone gives this offering in their own home. And the question is, how does that work? How is that an offering without an altar and without a temple if you're just sitting in your house? If you read carefully and subtly, it's clear that every Jewish home on the night of that very first Passover was transformed into a temple. So, for example, the blood of an offering is usually sprinkled on the corner of the altar. There was no altar, but they painted their doorposts with blood. And that indicates that every home became a sacred altar and a sacred temple. Even nowadays, without the sacrifice, we all relate to cleaning our homes from chametz, from leaven, and eating matzah as something that happens 8 days a year on Passover. But did you know that in the Torah it's clear that this distinction between chametz and matzah, between leaven and unleavened bread, was operative in the temple all year round? Whenever somebody bought a meal offering, the meal offering had to be made of unleavened bread, whether it was Pesach or not, and no chametz, no leaven could ever touch the altar in the temple. This is most likely because leaven represents pride and matzah represents humility. And so every Pesach, when we cleanse our home from chametz and we only eat matzah, we are essentially transforming our homes into a temple. And so I think perhaps it's fitting that we're all sort of stuck in our homes in advance specifically of the holiday, which is all about, which is the holiday of turning our homes into minor temples, which is exactly what Pesach is all about. On Pesach, if you think about it, there's no other night where we have a sort of religious experience that we usually associate with shul, where most people have it instead in their home. This ritual, this one of the most important rituals in Jewish life, the Pesach Seder. That's the one Seder, that's the one ritual, unlike Kol Nidre and so many prayer services which are done in shul, but this is a sacred ritual that we do in home. Now, many synagogues, of course, offer a Seder in the space of the synagogue, but it's in the social hall. It's not in the sanctuary. So it's not really a synagogue-based ritual. But on Passover evening, the Hasidic custom, which I have, is the head of the household or the father wears a kittel, which is something we usually associate with shul, with the high holidays, that white robe with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. At the Seder, we sit around the table and sing Hallel, which is a ritual that is also every other time of the year is associated with being in synagogue. But on that night, we sing it or sitting around our table. And so on Passovers, we transform our homes into places that are sacred, into places that are minor temples. We are sanctifying both space and time in this unique way. To quote Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik in his beautiful Haggadah, in my experiential, not intellectual memory, Two nights stand out as singular, as endowed with a unique and fascinating quality, exalted in their holiness and shining with a dazzling beauty, the night of the Seder and the night of Kol Nidre. As a child, I was fascinated, indeed entranced, by these two clear moonlit nights, both wrapped in grandeur and majesty. So, a beautiful poetic way of describing the night of Kol Nidre, where everybody goes to shul, and the night of the Pesach Seder. This is my commentary on Rabbi Soloveitchik's insight. The night of the Seder, where everybody is home with friends, with family, and it's transformed into indeed something magical. So I want to conclude by quoting something beautiful that my son Ari said just yesterday. I was tutoring one of our bar mitzvah boys, Yonatan Rich, whose bar mitzvah is next December, and I asked him to chant the Trupp chart to see if he knows the musical notes for the laning, for Torah reading. And I was tutoring him on FaceTime, by the way, we didn't meet in person. And he was chanting the chart. Mapach pashta zakef katon merfa tipcha munachet mafta. My son Ari overheard him, and his eyes lit up, and he said, "He's at shul. He's at shul." And I almost shed a tear. I thought that was such a beautiful insight from my 3-year-old son Ari, who heard Torah laning chanting and said, "He's at shul." And I want to close by saying, let's all learn from Ari. We were indeed at shul at that moment. We weren't in the building, we weren't in the makom, but we can bring shul, the shul experience, that sacred experience, into our homes. So let's all learn that from Ari, and I wish us all a good and peaceful Shabbos in our homes. Shabbat Shalom.